the screen over to Petter. There we go.
Okay, great, thanks. Everybody sees the screen. Okay, I am happy to be able to talk in this Nordic forum about a project that I have been working with in different ways, actually for maybe say 20 years plus, since the late 90s. And this thing that I'm going to talk about now, called Stockholm or OneStockholm, is the latest aspect of this. And the pictures you see here on this screen are things that happened during the last year within the Stockholm project, which has its place in the local newspaper chain Mitt I in Stockholm, formerly also known as DirektPress. The two companies have merged, so now it's the same thing. And this is a chain with a reach of approximately 900,000 households all over Greater Stockholm in all kinds of neighborhoods. So it's a really very interesting and fantastic opportunity to experiment and to work out ways of how to use journalism as a tool for helping people to meet across various kinds of borders and segregating divisions within the city. So the theme of this short talk is journalism and segregation, and how journalism can be used as a tool in relation to furthering problem solving in an urban, very segregated context, which we have in Stockholm. So what we did last year in August, or rather September, was that we started quite freely to just employ new methods. We had a rather freewheeling start and just tried things out. For instance, this portable subway seat that we got from the public transport company, and we used it in ways that I'll explain a little bit more about later. And in the beginning, we had the way we presented the project was not really so much about journalism, but more about how we could use the reach of our newspaper to inspire people to feel more, to feel more free in communicating across all these social, ethnic, economic borders and divisions within Stockholm. And the subway seat was sort of, we used it symbolically in a way, because subway seats are the places where people sit next to one another daily in their daily life, but very seldomly actually maybe talk to each other over these borders. So we thought it was a fun concept and instructive in a way. And we placed these subway seats out we took them to several places, often known for a very specific social, what you could call social value or a context. Like this is in Östermalmstorg, which is maybe the richest part of Stockholm. And we brought people together from who wouldn't meet at all in this place normally. And in the beginning, we used these little talking symbols to help the conversation, just to make it a bit more relaxed and fun. Just a few words about Stockholm, which is, as most of you know, a extremely segregated place, where the parts of town where tourists visit, and which is most people maybe regard as, I mean, what do you think about when you think about Stockholm? It's quite small part here in the center with Gamla stan and Södermalm and Östermalm and Kungsholmen, but most people actually don't live there. Most people live in the suburbs, and some of these suburbs, actually the ones that are circled here, are mostly in the media known for various kinds of social problems, and often linked to criminality, especially now because we have a very, very strong, I mean, public discourse going on about the shootings and the gang violence and gang-related criminality. And this is actually a map from 2014 from the police, where they have circled where these violent gangs have their location, actually. And these are also a part of Stockholm that I have worked very much with over the past 20 years in various settings. A quick background where all this comes from. Already in the 90s, I worked at Dagens Nyheter, the Stockholm desk, and was there given the opportunity to start experimenting with something that was then called public journalism, which was a movement that came from the United States, basically. And at least in my interpretation, one of the central tenets of this was helping public conversation between normal citizens, trying to move the public conversation from the elite level down or out to ordinary citizens, and really make a point of bringing them into the conversation and taking the sort of grassroots level as a starting point for how we talk about things and what we talk about. Eventually, this shifted, or in my professional situation shifted in 2006 over to having the opportunity to start Södra Sidan together with Rosbe Jelai, who is here sitting here in the square of Skärholmen, and I'm hidden here behind you all. And we did this project for a long time and managed actually to start and fund a citizen-based local newspaper that was distributed to all kinds of households, and we eventually reached a circulation of 100,000 copies every week, and we did public journalism together with citizens. And for us, this was very much about addressing hot button issues, the controversial issues, the ones that really need to be solved in a community, because especially in a situation where people maybe come from very different kinds of backgrounds, have different concepts of how, for instance, in this case, young teenage girls' freedoms or rights within the family or in the public space. So we did a lot of rather, I mean, deep diving journalism based on dialogue and talking a lot around these kinds of questions. How can girls in families with a background in, for instance, Middle East or other places where there's what you call this kind of honor culture, how can they work out space in relationship with their families, and bridging over these kind of the difficulties that you have in adapting and finding new ways to do things in a new country. We also talked a lot about whenever there was election, which we actually had to work. We saw several elections. We talked a lot about how people make their choices and how to deal with the challenges of, for instance, the surge of the Swedish Democratic Party and these kinds of populist sentiments, how to relate to them and how do we discuss these things in a civic way. And basic principles were always for us starting bottom up, finding out what people really need to talk more about and focusing on people's own solutions and encouraging dialogue across boundaries, since solutions are never, I mean, simple solution. Different people, different groups, or have their own interests and their own ideas of what is a solution. But the whole thing in this approach is to use the newspaper as a place where people who otherwise are more or less stuck in their bubbles can actually find a way of engaging with one another in a shared public space, in a public conversation, and making this attractive. So, but what happened over the years was that what happened to all newspapers that base their revenue on advertisement is that things got increasingly hard. After 5 years, we joined the big newspaper chain called DirektPress in Stockholm in order to get some more professionality when it came to sales and to boost our potential to survive and to expand, which we actually did for a few years, but then revenues kept dropping and eventually things had to change. I left the newspaper and instead started finding out ways to fund this kind of project, which eventually evolved into Stockholm, where we got some money from a governmental innovation agency called Vinnova. We also got some money from the public transport company in Stockholm and one of the bigger public housing companies. And so I could recruit a few members, Lisa, Leila, and Christina, and we started to do things. And as I said, and this was after last summer in 2019. So we spent the first 1 or 2 months while it still was warm out to place out our subway seats in parks and in squares, and tried to show people that it is perfectly possible to talk even about rather sensitive and difficult issues like youth crime or rich people, poor people, social divisions, cultural clashes, and all this. It actually worked in many ways. It was more difficult to make really good films out of it, because since our idea was to bring the film camera from the start and to make people relax, and to do this actually in live in front of a camera was rather, it was challenging, but it worked in many ways and was interesting. Leila, our team member, was our star, interviewing people who she sought out from people she had own prejudices against, people she would never dare or want to think she would like to talk to. She went up to them, asked them questions, and we did little movies or little films, video clips around this also. We also did, in a few occasions, we did public meetings where we borrowed a stage in a partly abandoned mall in the center of Stockholm, and we managed to gather people to talk about the future of Stockholm. For instance, how shall we find hope or faith in the future when everything seems so troubled? And we had very interesting talks about this. This headline reads, "The solution is within all of us." And that was more or less one of the bottom lines. We did regular journalism as well, increasingly as the weather got worse and we couldn't spend so much time out in the outdoors. So we started to do regular interviews and picking up themes. And we worked for almost 2 months. We worked with a theme about what happens when young people with totally different social and cultural background wind up together in the same school. When they are 16, they start in what's called gymnasieskolan, and this isn't always very easy, because people have no experience in each other, and how do you work out these clashes that people find themselves in. And there we did a rather successful big live talk in one of these schools, where the headmaster and a couple of students talked this out, and that was fun. And we also, we spent quite a lot of time visiting different schools, discussing the subject with students. We also, after January, February, we started working with a thing that was rather hot then, teenage muggings. 15, 16, 17-year-old teenagers rob each other, and in some cases also humiliate them and exert power over the others. And we wanted to discuss with teenagers, what is this actually about? Why do people do this? And what does it say about power structures and relationships between different groups, social groups within the town? And we did this. I worked then together with a guy from a design, an IT program in the university, and he illustrated this, and we did it in a kind of swipeable short story version on Instagram. You can look at it if you like. And then came Corona, and then we couldn't have any meetings. We couldn't do what we had hoped for. So instead, we did, or mostly I did, a series of articles about how do we overcome these, the isolation problem that now, okay, so Stockholm is an isolated place. Now Corona comes and gets even more isolated. How do we communicate? What are the forums at all where we can actually do things together? And in this case, with these young boys, it's about how can people themselves take part in spreading the word, helping people to manage. And now after summer, we have merged, our two newspaper chains have merged. We've had a long pause in the Stockholm, but we are up and running again. And now since a few weeks doing journalism, circling about what is the role of schooling and the relationship between schools and parents when it comes to managing the problem of kids being drawn into criminality, the lack of control that some parents feel when their kids are drawn into this. And so we have interviewed headmasters and parents, and now currently I'm working with another series that will be published soon about the relationship between young people and the police, which also I think will be fun. So what have we learned from all this? Experimenting is fun, but also confuses audiences and colleagues. Is this journalism? External funding, which we had to rely on initially at least, does undermine credibility, because then it suddenly is not normal journalism, it's paid by someone else. And that is a dilemma, because sometimes you have to ask somebody else to pay for this, because otherwise there won't be money for it within the newspaper company. But that is a thing that, maybe it's possible to work around it, but we haven't really found the way. So now I'm cut off from external funding, and I'm part of the normal newsroom, which is much easier in that way. The approach is widely appreciated, what we do, but the whole idea of bringing people together and helping people talk more easily with one another, what on earth do we actually mean by that? That was never really, really clear, but it's more like setting an example, showing by example that it is possible, and hoping that people will be inspired, but then actually attracting audiences into a totally new social media platform called @Stockholm. On Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, we flopped more or less. Nobody went there. I mean, a few hundred went there. So it didn't work, even though we had this exposure within the newspaper chain. People still don't turn up at live forums if you arrange them in the evenings. We had one successful live forum, which was daytime in the school. we hope, and maybe we'll be able to work more with the fact that online dialogue has now become sort of a normal tool for a lot of people, thanks to the corona crisis. So now doing things like this can probably, we think there's a potential that we'll try to explore over the next months also, and maybe we'll get some funding for that too, that kind of project. But still, I mean, I am really, really fortunate and lucky to having been able to place this project within this huge newspaper company with almost 1 million weekly reach in all kinds of social settings. How can we use this reach and to bring people together if that is what we want to do? So journalism works as long, in this sense, as long as you ask yourself, whose perspective do I need to include for this problem to be able to be solved? And you need to really focus on people's own solution, and you need to encourage dialogue across boundaries, as we talked about before. And all this, as some of you might notice, sounds very much like what is called konstruktiv journalistik, constructive journalism, which is the new word since more 10 years back or something for this kind of movement within journalism. So I spent the summer writing a rather, much too long report about the idea of constructive journalism, where I have looked at how this has been interpreted and practiced in Sweden, in the radio, in the television, and in some also print newspapers. So if you're interested in reading more about the relationship between these kinds of projects and the constructive journalism movement, and if you read Swedish, then you can go on to visit this address below. And if you want to learn more about Stockholm, you can visit the other address below. And now I will conclude with these 3 questions. Can journalism be used to bridge social divides? Should it be used? It's misspelled there. Should it be used for such purposes? Or does that contradict other important, I mean, the whole point of journalism maybe isn't at all this. It would be interesting to hear your thoughts about that. And what in this final square, it says, what are your own experiences and what works in your experience? So when we enter the breakout rooms, this is what you can discuss. And that was that. And I can see that I've overstretched my time with more than 5 minutes. So is there time for a few questions? What do you think, Laura?
Yes, I'd just suggest if there are any immediate questions, like to pose to Petter before we go into the smaller group. So please wave your hands. If you can, Petter, stop sharing your screen so that I can then see if people want to wave or something.
And I will also turn off the recording now.
Okay, thank you.